Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Phil Games, and welcome to the complete timeline slash lore or whatever of Glitchtale Explained. For those of you who haven't seen previous versions of this video, basically what I'm going to be doing is summarizing all of the important events and lore of Glitchtale up to this point in chronological order mostly, with explanations of how or why things happen thrown in when necessary. And trust me, there are more parts that need explaining than you might realize at first. And just in case someone for some reason clicked on this without knowing what Glitchtale is, it's an animated series on YouTube by Camila Cuevas, based on the video game Undertale by Toby. So yes, there will be spoilers for anything and everything in both Glitchtale and Undertale up through the latest Glitchtale episode that's been released. Please check the title of the video to see which one that is. This video is going to be in 4 separate parts, so if you're watching this part 1 soon after it's released, you are going to have to wait a little bit longer for the rest. And I don't want to see you complaining about it, because if I was doing this all in one video, then you would not be watching this right now. I'll make a playlist that has all of the parts in it, which there should be a link to in the description, and I will also upload a full combined version of all of the parts if enough of you want it, so make sure to tell me if you would want something like that down in the comments. So, most of you are probably aware of Glitchtale's 2 timelines, Timeline 1 being the failed timeline, and Timeline 2 confusingly being the one where most of the series actually takes place. Since I'm going in chronological order though, I actually am going to be explaining the events of Timeline 1 first. But don't worry, it's not actually all that different until way later on. I'll explain it when we get there. Also, you'll probably notice that I'm not starting with the prequels, even though I said we're going in chronological order. Again, I'll explain when we get there. And also, lots of quick things to talk about here at the beginning. Cammy has said that she doesn't want to explain every little detail so that there would be some room for theorizing and stuff, so just so you know that not every tiny thing is 100% confirmed, but I will try to make that clear when that's the case. Plus, even Cammy has admitted that Season 1 is a bit of a mess, so not everything will be completely explainable, but I will do my best. Any information that I bring up that's not right in the animation itself is either from the official Glitchtale wiki, not the fan-made one, I'll put a link in the description so you can see the right one, or is directly from Cammy herself. If you're watching this a while after I posted it, before you ask any questions in the comments, please check to see if there's a pinned comment answering some frequently asked questions, because maybe your question will be answered there. Okay, I think that's all of the housekeeping stuff I needed to get out of the way. You have been looking at my face for long enough, so with that, let's jump into the lore of Glitchtale.
The first thing you need to get into your head to really understand what happens in Glitchtale is to remember that it still takes place in the world of Undertale. Meaning that, just like in Undertale, this world takes place in a game, and it knows that. So naturally, Glitchtale's timeline starts the exact same way every Undertale timeline does, unless it actually doesn't, but we'll talk about that later. With the war of humans and monsters, Chara's adoption by the Dreamers, Chara convinces Asriel to take his soul and go to the surface to get 6 more, but Asriel refuses to kill anyone, which results in both of their deaths. All the other humans fall down and are killed by Asgore, all the true lab stuff, which we'll get back to some of in a little bit, etc. And then finally, Frisk falls into the underground, and his determination awakens Chara's spirit, essence, thing. Now, going back to the fact that this is all supposedly taking place within a game, we come to another crucial fact. In Glitchtale, Frisk, an actual being in the game's world, actually takes the role of the player. Since, it would be kind of hard to represent the concept of a player in any other way in an animated series that takes place within a game world. Also, there's a theory that the game just kind of spawned Frisk in the underground. There's some evidence supporting that, but honestly, it doesn't matter that much for the story. As for Chara, it's kind of unclear whether Cammy is interpreting him to be the narrator or not. There's some evidence both for and against it, but either way, Chara is still with Frisk in the same way that he is in Undertale, however that works exactly. And yes, while Frisk and Chara do not have genders in Undertale, Cami has decided to make both of them male for her series, so that is how I will be referring to them in this video, but really it doesn't matter that much to the story, so believe whatever you want. Interestingly, Frisk is actually able to recognize Chara as a person, unlike a normal Undertale player would, and they actually form a bit of a friendship. So this version of Frisk goes through the true pacifist route multiple times before, classic Undertale player story, he starts to get bored with it and begins trying some new things. By which I mean murder. Eventually, Frisk plays the game so much that he sees every single piece of dialogue, every single secret, every single fun value event, except for anything involving beginning the genocide route. At least I'm pretty sure he never started one and backed out or anything, but I guess it's possible that he did. And we could say that he hasn't seen Mystery Man either if we really want to preserve a tiny piece of continuity in episode 2. But unfortunately, for a player who has nothing else to do but experience the game over and over, the genocide route is kind of inevitable. And this is where things start to get complicated. Throughout Frisk's genocide, a substance called hate begins to generate in Frisk's soul. It's left up to interpretation, or maybe just not confirmed yet, whether this comes from Frisk's own hatred or the monster's hatred towards him. But either way, Frisk actually deflects all of this hate onto Chara, thinking that it would just go away. Well, all official sources say that this didn't actually happen until later when Frisk was just about to reset, but Chara definitely looks like he's corrupted by the hate before that, so I'm gonna say that it happens before the first episode starts. But yeah, I kinda gave it away. The hate is super powerful and actually somewhat sentient, so it corrupts Chara and amplifies his hatred. And this is the state in which Frisk finally enters the last corridor. And this is where Glitchtale really begins. Frisk begins his battle with Sans with full intent to completely finish this run. But of course, Sans proves to be a huge challenge and kills Frisk countless times. As Sans continually pleads with him to turn back, Frisk does start to realize that completing this route isn't worth it, so he tries to reset. However, the hate-filled Chara can now see no way forward but destruction. He stops Frisk from resetting, then takes over Frisk's body and traps him inside. No idea how, but don't worry about it. Chara's hate actually allows him to overpower Sans, but Frisk then breaks out of his own body, again, don't worry about exactly how, and blocks Chara's killing blow. Sans then absorbs Frisk's soul as he dies. See how both of his eyes light up blue? That's always a signal in Glitchtale that means that he has a higher amount of determination than normal. This new power allows him to quickly murder Chara, and also to reset. A reset was never supposed to happen in that way or in that place in the story, but it did. Because of this copy of the game, if you will, begins to become corrupted, causing glitch after glitch that will keep building and building on each other until, eventually, unless some way is found to fix them, this timeline will be erased forever. In the meantime, however, this small break in the game's code does not go unnoticed. Due to a glitch, which is short for because Cami wanted to make it this way, Frisk, who separated with Sans after the reset, is able to rename the fallen human after a normal reset instead of a true reset. Feeling guilty after the near genocide run, Frisk knows that his next one will be a pacifist one again, but that doesn't stop him from wanting to experiment. Realizing that the timeline must be glitched, he decides to try playing the game on hard mode, hoping that he will finally be able to find a new ending. Thanks to another glitch, he's actually able to make it past the end of the ruins and continue playing as if everything's normal, all the way through right after sparing Papyrus. Note that Frisk and Chara are now separated since Frisk rejected Chara and the hate, meaning that Chara is now in the Void, which is a place made up by Undertale fans that, at least in Glitchtale, is separate from all the timelines and is basically where you go if you exist in the game files, but have no place in the game itself. But certain beings in the Void can observe and even tamper with the timelines. Speaking of that, let's talk about W.D. Gaster, because before we move on, we need to talk about Cami's interpretation of his backstory. At least the stuff that's directly related to Undertale. We'll get to the prequel stuff later. And I know I said I wanted to go in chronological order, but honestly, I just didn't know where else to put all the Gaster stuff, so here we go. First of all, his full name is Wingdin Gaster, which... let's just forget about that and not say it again for the rest of this video, okay? In Glitchtale, Gaster is what Undertale calls a boss monster, like Asgore and Toriel, meaning that his soul is strong enough to persist for a few moments after death, and that if he were to have a child, his ability to age would be tied to his child's ability to age, which is why Asgore and Toriel stopped aging after Asriel died. Cammy expands this lore a little further and says that there is a direct magic link between the soul of a boss monster and their child that gives half of the parent's magic to the child, and this magic is only returned if the child reaches their prime, whatever that means, or the child dies. But I'm guessing the link between their souls still remains if the magic is returned, except maybe in the case of death. It's unclear exactly how this works if a boss monster has more than one child, but Gaster actually does, and while this isn't confirmed in Undertale, in Glitchtale's case, his children are in fact Sans and Papyrus. Maybe since Gaster had already given half of his power to Sans, Papyrus only technically got 25% of his base power, which is why he's weaker than Sans, or maybe Sans has just reached his prime, but Papyrus hasn't? Anyway, Gaster has a very unique power called Chroma Magic, which allows him to mimic the powers of all 7 main soul traits, even Determination. For Gaster, this power manifests itself as 7 hands that he can telekinetically control, that can each mimic one trait at a time. And he also obviously has Gaster blasters, just like Sans. Now on to Gaster's famous experiment. Cammy doesn't give too much context for this, other that it had something to do with the core, it failed because of a lack of determination, and it caused Gaster and at least one of his followers to fall into the core and end up in the void. Or at least a big part of him did, since he was supposedly shattered across time and space. Also, it's kind of weird that Sans calls Gaster by his first name here and in other places, but I don't know how to explain that, so moving on. It's also inferred that everyone actually forgot about Gaster after this, except for Sans, you know, with the whole secret don't forget thing that might have something to do with Deltarune, but obviously nobody knew that back in 2016, so we all thought he was trying to hold on to memories of Gaster or something. And apparently Asgore, who had been close enough friends with Gaster that he was able to remember him. So, Gaster was left alone in the void without anything to do except watch the timelines continue without him. That is, until he notices this glitchy, seemingly impossible hard mode timeline, and wonders if he might be able to enter it and be whole again. Sure enough, Gaster is able to hijack Sans' teleportation powers while he and Frisk are teleporting from Waterfall to Grillby's, where Sans was planning on warning Frisk about the potential consequences of what they did in the last timeline, since Sans can now remember previous timelines, or maybe just the one previous timeline, because of a glitch. Yeah, it's a bit of a debate whether or not Sans could actually remember other timelines in Undertale, but Glitchtale does later confirm that in this interpretation, Sans can only remember other timelines because of a glitch. Anyway, Gaster causes Frisk to end up in the secret corridor in Waterfall instead of Grillby's. Frisk enters the gray door and finds himself in the void with Gaster. Gaster then traps Frisk inside using this weird goopy stuff that looks kind of like hate, but it's not. It's just like void goo or something. One of those things we shouldn't try too hard to understand. Then Gaster actually covers the reset button, which completely stops Frisk from resetting, saving, and loading. Then he attacks, hoping to take Frisk's soul and become powerful again. Just in time, Sans teleports in and saves Frisk, but is unable to teleport out because of Gaster's power holding him there. This forces Sans to destroy the door, locking them in the void. Unfortunately, this also allows Gaster to escape out of the void and back into the game world, causing him to regain more physical form, or maybe causing all of his different pieces to come back together again if we're still going with the shattered across time and space thing, which allows him to use his chroma magic again. Then Gaster almost kills Sans because, yeah, he's at the point where he's willing to even kill his own son to get all of his power back, then tries to take Frisk's soul. But Frisk's determination allows him to refuse to be taken, just like Frisk refusing to die during Asriel's battle in Undertale. so Sans is able to once again absorb Frisk's soul instead. With this new power, Sans is able to kill Gaster, sending him back to the void. Then, telling Frisk to take his time in the ruins to give Sans some time to do something, which is confirmed to be fixing that machine in his lab, he resets one final time. This time, Frisk, still playing in hard mode by the way, is able to make it all the way to Hotland without any trouble. At his hot dog stand, Sans finally gets to warn Frisk about the dangers of resetting in weird places, something that, although Sans doesn't realize it, Frisk is already well aware of. But it's already too late. Through a combination of glitches and Frisk's old hate, Chara is able to force his way from the void back into the game world with the intent of gaining power until he has enough to destroy this corrupt timeline. It's not confirmed anywhere, but it seems like letting Chara back into the timeline is the game's first attempt at getting rid of it for good. Chara spawns inside the true lab where he kills the amalgamates and takes their determination so he can continue to exist, soon getting enough to take control of the timeline away from Frisk. Soon, Frisk notices some corruption spreading from the true lab and goes to investigate. However, this is exactly what Chara wants. Chara throws Frisk into the DT extraction machine, hoping to get even more determination from him. Flowey, who, if you remember from Undertale, has been watching Frisk ever since first meeting him in the ruins, sees this, and thanks to, guess what, yet another glitch, he both recognizes Frisk and Chara as the separate people they were all along, and remembers Frisk's real name. He also recognizes that Chara is the one he was really afraid of toward the end of the almost genocide route. Having no other options, Flowey tells Sans what happened, and they team up to save Frisk. However, Chara is successful in extracting the determination from Frisk, and is able to escape with it as well as leftover determination extracted from the other 6 human souls in the past. Sans then takes Flowey and the unconscious Frisk back to his house in Snowdin. And by the way, Frisk's soul should technically be gray here instead of empty, I think, because according to the rules established later, this would mean that Frisk is most likely dead, or at least very close to death, which he's not. Frisk wakes up in Sans' lab, where Sans is almost finished repairing his machine. Surprise, surprise, a glitch causes it to actually work, fully bringing Gaster back from the void. And then Frisk is scared, but Gaster's like, don't worry, I don't need your soul anymore. And then Frisk is like,
okay, I believe you.
Except that at this point, Gaster has suppressed a ton of his memories, specifically of his life before the Underground, which technically doesn't even exist in the game's code yet, I think, but we'll get there. And of the experiment that sent him to the void, so it's completely possible that Gaster doesn't even remember that whole fight he had with Frisk and Sans, but oh well, moving on. Getting right to work, Gaster takes the 4 of them to where Asgore keeps the 6 human souls. Sans gives the souls to Flowey, allowing him to take on his Omega form. However, Chara is one step ahead of them and is waiting nearby. He absorbs all of the determination he stole from the true lab, which actually gives him different colored abilities, somewhat similar to Gaster's magic. Gaster, Sans, and Flowey fight as hard as they can to defeat Chara and protect Frisk, with Gaster even blocking Chara from resetting, saving, or loading, just like he had done to Frisk previously, and Sans using his real special attack, which is called Blast Termination. Gimme, please. I can't complain. Asgore would be proud. But the determination and hate that is still inside Chara is too strong, the former allowing Chara to refuse to die, and the latter regenerating his body. Once even the 6 souls inside Flowey run out of energy, all hope seems lost. But at the last moment, Frisk is able to muster back all the determination that was extracted and use it to reinvigorate the other souls, sending them back into Flowey. Not only that, but another glitch allows Flowey to absorb Frisk's soul as well, meaning Flowey is finally able to take on his true form again. Not long after, Papyrus, Undyne, Alphys, Asgore, and Toriel, because I guess this now would have been right before the true pacifist ending, find Sans and Gaster in the castle. They all have a lot of catching up to do on account of, Gaster being back, and also because there's now an impenetrable giant ball of hate that Chara created just floating there, i.e. Cammy's excuse to not have to draw a background for this fight scene. Inside the ball, Chara confronts his best friend, revealing to Asriel that doing a genocide route had been Frisk's own choice, and had nothing to do with Chara influencing them. Then, Chara uses the power he's gathered to form the erase button, which he believes is the only way to end the glitches. However, Chara can't press it himself, just like how Chara couldn't press it in Undertale. Perhaps it is only the player that can press it, meaning that it would have been Frisk's soul inside of Asriel that would have allowed him to do so. But despite having very good reason to hate Frisk for causing this mess, Asriel seems to somewhat remember, probably because of a glitch, when Frisk forgave him despite all the wrong that he had done as Flowey. Erase is not an option for him, so he destroys the button without hesitation. He and Chara fight, but Asriel realizes how to purge the hate from Chara when they both realize that they're both still wearing the heart lockets that they gave to each other all those years ago. Chara destroys his in an attempt to show his apathy, but something deep inside him instantly regrets it. Asriel sees this and takes this chance to save his best friend. He calls on the 7 souls inside him, each of which fill him with their respective trait. Asriel uses these traits against Chara, then reverts to his child form and reminds him of the brotherly love they once had with an embrace. Chara finally remembers his love for Asriel, and the hate is purged from his body and soul. However, this also rids Chara of his determination, which was the only thing allowing him to exist when he shouldn't have been able to. Knowing that he's about to disappear and go back to the void, Chara uses what little is left of his own soul, which he's technically not supposed to have anymore since the real him died forever ago, but don't worry about it, as a vessel to house all of the traits that Asriel had collected during the battle, giving Asriel a new soul. This is a very unique soul. The fact that it's right side up gives it the illusion of being a human soul, but the fact that it belongs to a monster means that it still has some properties of a monster soul, I think. I'll mention his soul again in a little bit. Since Asriel now has a soul of his own, Frisk's soul can go back to his body but still leave Asriel with enough souls to destroy the barrier. So, that's exactly what he does, opening the way to the surface and letting the other 6 human souls finally pass on in peace. Asriel then reunites with his parents, and the monsters, and unfortunately the hate that Chara got rid of, go free. Frisk knows that this is it. This is the ending that he had been hoping for, one where not only the monsters go free, but both Asriel and Gaster were saved. But it can't last, can it? There's nowhere to go beyond this point. Nowhere, that is, besides another reset. But Frisk can't do it. He's finally ready to leave the game where it is. And besides, the timeline is so glitched at this point that a reset might just cause it to collapse completely. So, Frisk then does something that shapes the course of every event to follow. He destroys the reset button. Aware of the fact that he is the player, he just assumes that destroying the reset button at a point where there's no more game to play will just mean that he's quitting the game, and that everyone else will be able to live in peace. But that's not what happens. Because the game is still in a glitched hard mode, Frisk continues to exist alongside everyone else, but he is no longer able to save or load. However, he is still the player, meaning that if he dies, since he has no way to reload a save, the world will cease to exist. Frisk then realizes that something bad is bound to happen, and begins looking for a way to reset again. And something bad does happen. See, the destruction of the reset button means that the game has to actually create a world on the surface for the story to continue in. Unfortunately, this sudden freedom of creation, by my assumption anyway, also gives it the chance to create a creature whose sole purpose is to finally destroy the corrupted timeline, one that won't turn away from the game's intentions like Chara did. But of course, coming up with all this new information means that the game also has to come up with a backstory for all of it, which means that it's prequel time. Well, at least that's how I thought the prequels worked, but now I've heard that this is being retconned so that the prequels did actually happen, and that the game was created as a byproduct of Gaster's experiment or something, and I just don't get why? Like, if what I've just explained is still canon, that doesn't mean I'll be any less attached to the prequel characters or care less about what happens to them or anything. Is it because Deltarune might have a different backstory for Gaster and Sans and all that? because that could easily be explained away by saying that this backstory didn't actually exist within the game of Undertale itself, so when things get all glitchy, it can create whatever backstory it wants for them. Or maybe it's because this super elaborate backstory is obviously way more complex than an actual real-life game would be able to automatically generate, but that's kind of what all Undertale ATs are, right? The game being able to go further off the rails than an actual game with actual code would ever be able to. I just think that the fact that in the quote-unquote old canon, this story starts with a fairly normal Undertale playthrough is really cool. And frankly, I didn't find out about this whole possible retcon until after I had just finished writing this script, and I really don't feel like going back and switching everything around, so this is what we're sticking with.